This is a helmet that I'm painting for a guy that was supposed to have the Maverick, the Top Gun kind of a theme to it. And there's a bird on the side of Maverick's helmet. It's kind of a red and white digital kind of looking bird. It's a really modern look. To achieve that, I don't have any sort of a sticker, a stencil, a template, so I decided I was just going to make my own. I took this plastic and I cut it up, and you can kind of see that it's got the bird shape, the rough outline of the... I brought it over here. This is just wrap film, some bulk remnant wrap film that I had. So I laid it out. I was able to cut out around it. This is the one that I cut out. I've still got a little bit of work to do on the eye, and then I can tie the two around together, but I'm going to run some fine line tape around it to try to clean up those edges from where I cut with my razor blade. When you don't have a stencil, rather than just trying to hand mask all that, I thought it would be easiest to build kind of a template out of plastic, use it to cut it out so the two match. Yeah, it's just the next step. It's those little things that try to save you time. Time is money. Alright, that turned out pretty well. Now that I got this all masked up, I'm ready to put the red on it. Before you go to the next step, it is imperative to make sure that all of your lines are down. I like to go over it with a spreader like this, go over all of my corners. Make sure down in those divots, everything is pushed down. I'm talking the whole thing. Every piece of tape on this needs to be gone over to make sure it doesn't pick up. Because I'm going over white, my next layer is going to be red. Red will wreck the edges on that white if I don't get it down. So just like any other color, make sure you get it pinned down really good, and then you're ready to go on to your next layer. I had the white on it. Now I've got the white masked off. It's going to have that Maverick theme. There's our bird on the side. Our tape is lifted up just a little bit, but I don't think that's going to be a problem with our next step of masking, because we're actually going to break the red line. We've got to do some masking on top, some fine line. The red has just a little bit of a grit to it, so I'm going to give it a good wipe down before I move forward. But yeah, so that's where we're at. We got to mask some red on here, or mask the red that's on here, and we're ready to move forward. So I used a little bit of an off-white because I've got kind of an idea of something that I'm going to do on this helmet that is going to be really fun to make a video out of, and it's going to give it a really awesome look. I've played with it a little bit in the past on some other helmets, but this one will be a completely new look. So yeah, looking forward to getting the black on. The Maverick helmet originally was red, white, and blue, but red and blue really clash. If you've ever seen red stacked against blue directly side by side, they really have that border that just kind of smashes into each other. So because I'm not going to have an ability to outline that with my final design, I'm going to switch that blue to black. Like I say, this is kind of my rendition of the Maverick helmet. And the dark blue just really doesn't do it for me, so I'm going to switch that over to black, and then the final product is going to be really cool. So follow along, and we'll get this thing in black. So when you're cutting something with the razor blade, always cut the one that overlaps the top. Always cut it back a little bit. So there's no reason to cut right on this top edge here if we're also going to cut on this top edge here. Rather than having two exposed top edges, you can cut this one back just a little, and then when you lift it up, the tape edge exposed is this clean edge from the existing masking tape. Now we'll cut this side. So now we've got a nice clean top point. When you're cutting with your blade, don't push it through and gouge the paint underneath. What you want to do is you want to have a sharp enough blade that you could put it on and drag it, but not push through it. One of the ways that I achieve this is I have a hone, so that rather than changing my blade out constantly every few minutes, I can just run it on my hone. And I've got a nice clean edge on it. So I can perform all these clean cuts, cut after cut after cut, not have to keep changing my blade out. I'm not looking for it to save money, more time than anything, because to change a blade out, you're talking it takes 30, 45 seconds every time you've got to change a blade out. rather than just sharpen it up real quick and right back to work. Well, we got this one in our first layer of clear. So basically what this clear is going to do is it's going to create like an M&M shell over everything. It's going to lock everything down. Now we can go back, resand it, and all these ledges where the paint is stacked, we're going to be able to sand those ledges out and you won't be able to feel it. It'll be nice and smooth. Another thing, we're going to have some fixing to do. When I pulled my tape off, a couple of spots lifted. This is not the end of the world, not a big deal. When we go back and we resand this, we can back mask some of this and airbrush in some paint and cover up some of these spots that got damaged. But with this helmet and with this design, I've got kind of an idea of what I want to do. I want to make it look really patinaed, but I don't want to necessarily sand off what we've got. We're going to paint some rust on from here on. We're going to give it some age. This helmet was designed back in the 80s. As far as the paint scheme, the Maverick paint scheme from Top Gun came from the 80s. I want to make it look like it's from the 80s. I want to make it look like it's 30 or 40 years old. And to do this, obviously, fiberglass shells don't rust. Carbon fiber helmets don't rust. We're going to have to paint that on. With the use of a sponge and a couple of techniques that I'm going to show you, we're going to be able to put a really unique look on this helmet and ultimately have a really cool product in the end. So while I'm sanding this clear to get it ready for our next little bit of base, when we start doing the rusting around the bottom, around the back of the visor and some of these areas, I planned on doing kind of a worn look. So some of the places that would wear on this during normal use would be on the tops of these ridges, you know, on the corners of the beak here, maybe some areas here after repeated reachings for the visor, the little lip there to kick the visor up. I'm going to go ahead and sand in some of that wear. We still have to add the eye to the eagle, yes, and we can actually add some wear to that as it's a base coat after it's been applied before we clear over it. But at this point, I can add some wear to this helmet to make it look like it's been rolling around for 40 years so that when we rust it, the rust kind of rolls with it. It's got that overly used 40, 50-year-old helmet that we're looking for. Yes, they're not made out of steel and they're never going to rust, but it'll have a really unique look. Basically like an old gas can. A gas can, not only is it going to show rust on the corners and whatnot, but it's also going to show wear from years of use and abuse. So I'm going to go ahead and work on sanding that stuff in while I finish sanding this clear so that we can paint on it. Now that the Maverick helmet is all sanded, we've got our clear down, we've got it sanded, all of our lines are hidden. We've done a little bit of a patina sand on it to kind of give it that used look because we want it to be old. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, I'm going to go and finish the eye of the eagle on the side. While I'm at it, I could touch up a couple of spots that I went a little too far on or that I missed, and I can start getting it ready for that rusting. So the next step I'm going to do is finish a couple of things, tie a couple of things up. Once that's all done, we'll start doing the brown for the rust. All right, now that we've got the eyes in place, we still have a little bit of work to do. The eye in the helmet, the original helmet was yellow. I'm not a big fan of that yellow. I might do it in a silver or something else later on, but we can kind of patina that later on and get that to fit our idea. Right now I'm ready to go through and do a lot of little cleanup. Some of these edges, as we were painting, they bled through. We got a little tail on them. I know it's hard to see, but there's a couple different ways we can fix it. We can either back mask it and airbrush in, cover that spot up, or we can sand it and give it a little bit more of a patina. The cool thing about the patina helmet is this is a really simple design for someone to do if they're just starting out with helmets. The cool thing is that you're going to sand out a lot of spots and make it look worn, so if you have a flaw, if you have a bleed through with your paint, that's a good area to sand. I personally am going to go back and fix some of these. I don't want it to be too patinaed. But like I said, that's my next step. I'm gonna re-patina these eyes so that they look like the rest of it. This is a high ridge here, and the first thing that would happen in real life with that high ridge, that's gonna be the first place for the paint to get worn off. So I'm gonna do a little bit of sanding here to kind of mimic what we had done before down there, before I'd put the eye in. Like I say, there's still some cleanup that we got to do, but then we're gonna move into our rust. So real quick, I'm gonna knock out those quick spots to clean up. I'm gonna time lapse that, and then we will move into putting our brown on there. I've got like 5 different browns that we're going to use to build rust. Rust isn't just a simple brown. It's got a lot of texture to it, and all that texture is different colors. So I've got several different browns. I've got a couple different sponges, a couple different techniques that we can rust this thing. So I'm really looking forward to get started on that, but first I got to finish cleaning this thing up. So yeah, I'm going to time lapse that, and we'll be ready to rust it here shortly. So because base coat is so much softer and so much more delicate than clear coated paint, clear coat creates a shell like an M&M. It's a really durable shell. Base coat's really frail. It doesn't even have a hardener. Basically, base coat is pigment and reducer so that you could spray it. It's thin enough to spray it, but there's no real catalyst in there to really build strength into it. So rather than using sandpaper to patina this, I've just got a soft gray Scotch-Brite. And like I say, with that softer red, it'll peel that right out of there. It'll sand it right off, and it's not going to be too aggressive and remove too much. So you can already see that quick, we're already cutting through it and getting back down to the patinaed spot that we had put in there beforehand when we had the clear on, when we sanded the clear. So that quick, base coat being that much softer, it pops right off there, and we're right back down to where we want to be. As you can see, that red sanded really easily, and we've got it back now to where this eye now matches the rest of the patina on the helmet. I still have to add the eyeball in there, but I'm probably going to wait on that until after I get it in another layer of clear. That way when I go back and sand it, I don't remove any of that red. I can patina just that eyeball and not take away any more of that red. That was kind of one of the reasons why I waited to kind of go too much further on it, because I knew that I wanted to do some sanding. And when you sand on those and you have white base and red base, sometimes it's easy to mix those two together and kind of create some pinkish to it. So I just wanted to not overdo it too early. We've got a really good look going here. I really dig the patina. Like I say, I still got some small areas I got to clean up real quick. I'm going to do those right now, and then we're going to get straight into putting rust on her. Now you can see what we just did there. See how crisp that line is? It was a little bit fuzzy, a little bit hazy. I went back and I backmasked. I masked off the red and I resprayed that edge of the white, and now it's just crisp. Look how crisp that line is. Sometimes you got to go over these things a couple of times to get those lines picked out and get those lines all tied up and clean. But as you can see on this side, same thing. We got that corner all crisped up. Yeah, so now we are ready to go forward with rust. The first thing we need to do is get basically our rough outline in some of the areas. A lot of times surface rust is only there because it's knocked the paint off. And when paint breaks away, it leaves kind of a jagged edge. There will be some areas where it'll be more like a fadey rust, where the rust has ran over the paint and just kind of, you know, attached itself to the existing paint. But for the most part, the thick rust areas are where it's ejected that paint, and when the paint breaks, it's really brittle, so it leaves a jagged, kind of a sharp edge on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to outline, you know, some areas around, more so around the bottom, maybe around the visor, maybe around some of these vents. I'm going to outline myself some room with the torn edge of my 2-inch tape. So when I use my tape and I rip it, it'll give me kind of that broken look that I'm looking for. It's a little jaggedy. The tape will actually cover the paint that will be existing. So what I'm going to do is lay this down, use this jagged edge, and then paint in here with my brown and give it that rust texture. So the first thing I got to do is go through and outline this helmet. I'm going to go ahead and set it on time lapse and knock this thing out. Give myself some spots of rust, maybe a couple spots in the back, mostly around the bottom, around the vents, around the visor, the places where on that edge, the rust can get underneath the paint and cause a failure. Everything's all masked up. The existing area that you see that is still shown will be rust. We are going to, first off, we're going to spray a little bit of white to try to lighten that up. What I want to get rid of is I want to get rid of these lines so that when we put the rust down, you don't see those paint lines. That would kind of really take away from the whole ideology of the rust. So I'm going to spray these and lighten them up. I don't want them to be just plain white because I want the rust to have a little bit of depth to it as far as light, dark. I'm going to take away the red, but I'm going to try not to totally kill out the black. We should have a good bit of rust around the bottom, on the visor, like I said, up on those ports, around the sides of it, the back, all the way around the base. So this will be a spray-on rust, and we'll go through a couple of steps on how to spray on the rust. I'll also use a sponge and go back, and I can add some rust in some small spots, like it's like a pinhole rust spot. Rather than just section removed. So we got a couple of different ways that we're going to do some rust on this. First things first, so we're going to go ahead and get started spraying it. I'm going to do the white, and then I'm going to go ahead and put down some brown, and then we'll start texturing it. So next steps next. We use the white to kill these lines. You can still barely see them, but that's okay. When I put my red rust base down, it'll help mold those in, so those will be hidden. Now, when I put the first layer of rust down, I don't want to just paint the thing that reddish brown. I'll use it to kind of highlight some areas. We'll leave some of this white so that when I put my next layer down, my next color of rust, my next brown, it helps to pop those. If you start stacking darker color on top of darker color, you just start to lose the luster of that. It just kind of gets mudded out and too dark. So we're going to try to keep some of this white base to allow it to pop. And like I say, with rust, you don't just have one plain brown. It's splotchy. It's got dark spots, light spots. It's just a really textured color. So we're going to try to put that texture in this paint. So like I say, next step is the reddish rust. We're going to put that down, and then we'll revisit it real quick before we start stacking our other browns on it. This is just after the first red that we put down, the first brown. It's kind of that brick color, like that old red oxide primer they used to use. You can see how it's got the texture in it. Those light and dark spots, those are intentional. That's the texture. Like I said before, typical rust isn't just a straight base color. It's got just thousands of little different browns, just minuscule differences in them, but they create that texture. I think this is already starting to get that rust look to it. So by the time we add a couple of more browns, my next one's going to be more of a kind of a darker tan. I'm going to work that in, and then we'll go back with the other ones, and then we'll use some orange candies to really kind of get that stuff to pop. I mean, so far so good. Next one. Ready for our third brown. This one's a little bit darker. The first one was more red. The second one was more tan. This one's more of a darker brown. So let's get that one on there, and then we'll be ready to start texturing it. You may be thinking this just looks like a splotchy old bunch of browns tossed on here, and it really doesn't look like rust. But it'll get there. It'll get there, I promise you. When we get the sponging done, it'll add that texture to it. It'll really make that rust pop. And then we can do a little bit more airbrushing and finish it out. I'm going to go ahead and get through this sponging real quick, and I'll show you what I got. So I've got my palette set up here, and you can see that I've got a couple of different, I got a reddish brown, I've got the tan, I've got a little bit of black. And what you do is you just take your sponge, you daub it into it a little bit, you get it loaded up just a little bit. You don't need much at all. And then when you go to start applying it, try it a couple of times on somewhere where it's not going to matter at all. And then once you get it figured out how much you want to use, you can start dabbing it in. Basically, this is just giving us a little bit of texture because rust is extremely textured. I'm going to go ahead and let this cure up. I don't want to try to get on the next one when you still see those little bit of wet spots on there. After this cures, we can do the next color. So the majority of the chunkiness of the rust is going to be red. So I've got another reddish tinted brown that I'm going to use to stack on top of this. You don't want it to be too consistent, but that's got a really good texture to it. I'm really happy with where we're at on that texture. I'm going to go ahead and get let this thing set up a little bit, and then I'm going to do the next one. And yeah, it's really coming along. I'm really happy with where we're at. Now that we're all cured up, I'm ready to go ahead with the next one. I'm going to use the same sponge. I've still got that reddish brown, and I've got the tan as well as some black. So now what I'm going to do is, by using this and mixing it with the tan, now we can create a different color profile and start getting them to flow together. Like I say, for the most part, it's the predominantly red chunks that come off. But with the black, we're going to be able to add more of that texture. And then when that's all finished up, we can go back and do a little bit of airbrushing and clean it all up. Give ourselves the runs off. So as the water's running around, say a rivet, it'll pull together that rust, and then it'll consolidate it in the streak down south of that rivet. So what we'll do is, after we get this all done, we'll go back on all that, on all of our edges where the water would run vertically down. We'll go ahead and give those tails and just kind of show the actual effect of rust. I am so happy with the way this is coming out. I've still got a little bit of airbrushing to do. Like I say, on those corners where that paint would cast a little bit of a shadow, I've got to do a little bit of white, and then I've got a couple of candies that I want to use to help pop that white. So I'm going to do that real quick, time-lapse that, and we are really close to unmasking this thing to see how it's going to look. Then we can airbrush the rest of it, bring some of that brown, that rustiness to kind of, bring the whole helmet together. I think this is going to be really cool. Yeah, we're really close. So that last technique that I just used, I basically just used one of my small brushes. I used a little bit of my white base coat. I would just dip it in there just a little tiny bit, get a little bit on the end of the brush, and then I would flip the brush with my finger. And basically what that does is it just particulates that. It just puts these little specks in here, which is, typical rust. It's just lots of different textures. So that worked out all right. I'm going to go ahead and dust on that little bit of orange candy, that yellow candy, that red candy, to try to get this thing just to pop a little bit with that white, and then a little bit black airbrushing, and we are ready to unmask. Apparently, I forgot to hit record when I did the black. I did do the tangerine. I did add a little bit of red, and then I went on to the black, and I forgot to hit record. But here it is, the finished product. I went through and I shaded the outsides of those just a little bit, just to kind of account for that depth change. I think we're ready to unmask it. I want to see what it looks like. I know when I'm unmasking, it looks like I'm just ripping it through with the time lapse, but when I'm unmasking my stuff, make sure you're very, very, very delicate, because there's paint underneath this that we do not want to disturb. So while you're peeling it off, just peel really easy. It's just like everything else. Take as much time as you can, as much time as you need to do it properly, because at this point, a mistake, pulling paint too fast, or pulling tape too fast and pulling some paint, that's a big mistake. So we don't want to have any issues. So I'm going to unpeel this thing as light as I can, as easy as I can, just with kid gloves until we get some more clear on it. What do you think? I like it. I really, really, really like it. We're not done with it yet. I would say we're about halfway done with the rust. We've still got to basically rust the rest of the helmet. Now, because we got the paint on there, it's not going to be as detailed as this rust. Basically, what we're going to do is, everywhere where this thing would rust, it would drain as it rained, and you would get these streaks down it. Plus, we've got to oxidize the surface a little bit, give it a little bit of age, because right now it's just sanded. It's like a perfect surface, but it's just worn. We don't want it worn, we want it old. So we got to bring some age into it. We got to bring these trails off of here. I mean, we still got quite a bit of work to do, but I mean, I think that worked out phenomenal. So I'm going to go ahead and work on the next step, and yeah, follow along with time lapse. What do you think of that? Does that look like it's 40 years old? Fiberglass doesn't rust, but this one did. I used a little bit of white there over the top just to kind of get a little bit of oxidization, a little bit of age through that. I've got a little bit of repairs to do. I still got to put the eyes here. I got a few little things to do, but man, I love it. What do you think? Leave me a message in the comments. Here we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the finished product. Look at that. What do you think? Did it turn out as good as you'd expected? Do you feel the rust in it? That is all paint. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys watch more. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notify button. You can see all the new content as it comes out. We got many more coming. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Thank you.